Before we begin today's story, I just want to announce that my fourth book is coming out this Thursday, May 22nd. It's called Every Shadow Has Teeth. It's written by me, Brett Schumacher. If you search Amazon for Brett Schumacher, it should pop up. It's a book of short horror stories. The KDP edition is available for pre-sale right now. And then the paperback will be out, I believe, a couple days after the 22nd. Thanks for all your support throughout the years, guys. I greatly appreciate it. Now on to the story. Back in the summer of '93, the sun seemed bigger, the trees taller, and the days just stretched on and on like a rubber band that you knew was gonna snap. We lived for Saturday morning cartoons, the Ninja Turtles, X-Men, and that weird claymation show that always made Frankie laugh. My world was a patchwork of cornfields, gravel roads, and the kind of freedom you only get when your mom's too busy with laundry to keep track of you. We'd guzzle cans of Surge, trade baseball cards on the porch, and argue about whether Michael Jordan or Ken Griffey Jr. was the best. That was the year Tommy Grady moved to Birch Lane right after school let out. He came from somewhere upstate, dragging a cardboard box stuffed with He-Man toys and a beat-up Sega Genesis. His dad worked at the grain elevator and looked like he'd been carved out of an old tractor tire. His mom never smiled much, always staring off at something none of us could see. Tommy was an only child, and his clothes never seemed to fit quite right. Always a little too big or a little too small. Now you probably know the type. He had a bowl cut, grass stains on both knees, and a grin that said, "I dare you." But with Tommy, there was something else. He didn't talk much about where he came from, but sometimes if the porch light was just right and we're all laying on our backs watching the stars, he'd tell us about his old school and how he got into trouble for fighting. "Wasn't my fault," he'd say, but never explain what started it. Tommy's folks didn't have much, so when he showed up on the first day of summer with a brand new Supersoaker 100, neon green, with the pressure tank and that wicked yellow nozzle, hell, we all thought he must have robbed the bank. He just grinned, pumped it up, and let loose on Frankie before anyone could blink. I mean, you gave Tommy a Supersoaker, and it was like handing Annie Oakley a pair of Colts. We called ourselves the Birch Lane Bandits. Me, Tommy, Jess, little Frankie. It was always just 2 steps behind and 3 steps louder than the rest of us. That summer, our turf was a stretch of road between the Johnson farm and the old Miller barn, a no-man's land of dandelions, wasp nests, and the kind of mud that sucked your sneakers right off of your feet. Every Saturday morning after cartoons and before the heat really set in, we'd meet up in Tommy's backyard. His mom would bring out popsicles and say, "Don't shoot your eye out, boys," like we were packing Red Riders instead of neon plastic water guns. She always loved saying lines from that movie while sucking on a Marlboro. But Tommy, man, he was something else. He'd go on and fill up that Supersoaker with cold hose water, pump it until it whined, and then pick us off one by one from behind the old oak, never wasting a drop. Jess used to say he had a Deadeye. Even grown-ups noticed. Hell, old man Johnson used to grumble that kid's going to be a sniper one day, which made Tommy's dad laugh and Tommy's mom frown. I wish I could tell you those were just lazy golden days, the kind that fades sweetly into your memory like the last notes of a summer song. But you asked me about Tommy, and the things you need to know is, nobody stays a kid forever. By the time we hit middle school, we'd swapped our Supersoakers for BB guns and started talking about girls instead of G.I. Joes. But Tommy, well, he never really put that water gun down. He'd tinker with it, make it shoot farther, faster, and colder. He was obsessed in that quiet way some kids are, the kind that makes you a little uneasy when you catch them staring too long at the way a stream carves through mud. And looking back now, I wonder if we should have all seen it coming. The way he'd smile when he'd soak someone right in the face. The way he'd keep pumping after everyone else was laughing and begging for mercy. But we were just kids, and Tommy was just our friend. It was the 4th of July when things really shifted. The whole neighborhood came out for the annual block party. Mrs. Miller's potato salad, sparklers in the driveway, and the long, slow sunset that made everything gold. We kids, high on watermelons, soda pop, hot dogs, and freedom, started our usual Supersoaker war. Tommy had tricked out his gun again, this time with a double-pump blast that could drench a kid from half a football field away. He looked like he belonged in a cartoon, the way he darted and spun and never missed. Never even aiming for just shirts or shorts. He always went for the face or the crotch. And Jess got real mad that year. He stormed off after Tommy nailed him right in the ear, left him sputtering and red-eyed. "Man, that little shithead don't know when to quit," Jess said, kicking up a cloud of dust as he left. I tried to laugh it off, but in the back of my mind, hell, I started to wonder. See, the thing is, Tommy always played to win. And by the end of that night, as the fireworks crackled overhead and the grown-ups sang God Bless America, Tommy was the last one standing, his Supersoaker resting on his shoulder like a soldier's rifle. The easy grin he'd once worn had all but vanished. The next summer, Birch Lane started to change. The Johnsons moved to Omaha. The Miller barn collapsed in a terrible thunderstorm, and Jess's parents split up, so he spent most weekends in town. It was mostly just me and Tommy riding our bikes down to the old creek, talking about nothing and everything. And one day we found a dead raccoon by the water's edge. Tommy crouched down, poked it with a stick, and just stared. "You ever wonder what it's like?" he asked. "To just stop moving?" I shrugged uneasy and kicked a stone into the water. Tommy squinted at the animal for another minute, then stood up, dusted off his knees, and walked away. After that, things between us felt different, like I was always one step behind, never quite sure what he was thinking. The way he looked at that raccoon, well, that stayed with me. High school came and our little world got bigger. Frankie moved away, Jess joined the football team, and I got a job at the hardware store. Tommy didn't really fit in anywhere. He'd show up at school with new bruises, say he fell off his bike or got hit playing ball, but nobody ever saw him play sports. He just kept to himself mostly, tinkering with whatever he could find in his dad's shed. And he still carried that old Supersoaker, now patched and painted. The plastic faded from 100 afternoons in the sun. It was a joke to some of the other kids, but Tommy would just smile that tight, lopsided smile and let the laughter roll off of his back. One afternoon, I caught him behind the gym, fiddling with a strange, heavy bottle. "Hey, Tommy, what's that?" I asked. "I'm just making it stronger," he said, not looking up. I told myself it was nothing. It was just Tommy being Tommy. But that night, laying in bed, I couldn't get the image out of my head. The Supersoaker, the bottle, Tommy's strange, empty eyes. Years passed. We graduated and we scattered. Jess went off to college. Frankie joined the Navy. And I stuck around helping my dad fix up old tractors and dreaming of getting out of town. Tommy drifted through town working odd jobs, always on the edge of things. Folks whispered about him, said he was odd, said he was mean. I think most people just plain forgot about him, really. But I never did. And that's when the news started to come in as well. About the animals found dead, about the strange burning smell down by the creek. I thought of Tommy. I don't know why. Well, not at first. Maybe it was just the way he looked at the world, like it was a target and he was always lining up for a shot. But then, last summer, the sheriff showed up at my door. He's a big, burly-looking guy with a badge that looked too shiny for our little town. "You know a man named Thomas Grady?" he asked. I nodded. "Yes, sir. We grew up together." He looked at me for a long time before he spoke again. "We found something out at the old Miller place. Some kind of weapon. Looked homemade. And we found this." He held up a battered Supersoaker, stained and cracked but unmistakable. I felt my stomach drop. All those years, all those summers, came flooding back. The water fights, the long bike rides, the way Tommy never missed. "He's gone," the sheriff said. "Disappeared. We're still looking for him, so if you see him, you let us know." After the sheriff left, I couldn't sleep for days. I kept thinking about that battered Supersoaker, about the way Tommy's eyes used to narrow when he was lining up a shot. At first, it was just a bad feeling, like a storm hanging out past the horizon. But then the reports started piling up. Stories whispered at the hardware store, in the line at the diner, anywhere folks thought nobody official was listening. And then a kid from 2 towns over came back from that creek with nasty burns up and down his arms. Said he'd seen a man in the trees, watching and holding something long and bright green. The doctors said it was a chemical burn, like an acid they had guessed. And then old Mrs. Carter's dog turned up dead, the fur eaten away in patches and his eyes gone milky. She cried so hard at the feed store, the clerk had to lock the doors early. The grown-ups told us to stay inside after dark, but I'd already stopped going out much anyway. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Tommy's skinny silhouette standing at the edge of the cornfield, Supersoaker dangling from one hand, the other clutching a plastic jug. I thought about calling Jesse, but he was gone off at college, living in a world where this kind of thing didn't happen. Well, not really. Frankie sent a postcard from somewhere out west, said he was doing fine, said he didn't miss much about home. I wanted to write back to tell him everything, but what could I say? "Hey, remember Tommy and that Supersoaker? He's gone bad, real bad." Yep. The town started to change after that. People started locking their doors, keeping their kids close. The sheriff set up patrols, but Birch Lane felt hollow. I watched it all from behind the counter at the store, fixing screen doors and selling fertilizer, waiting for some sign that Tommy was really gone, or that he was coming back. Then one night, just as summer slipped into fall, I heard it. A hiss, soft and steady, like a snake in the grass. I looked out my window and saw a shadow moving through the yard, slow and careful. My heart hammered in my chest as I grabbed the old baseball bat from beside the bed and crept outside. The moon was full, silvering the world in a way it does when everything's about to change. And there he was, Tommy. Taller, leaner, hair longer and tangled, but damn, that was still Tommy. He wore a threadbare jacket and boots caked with mud. In his hands, the Supersoaker, gleaming wet under the moonlight, and in his other hand, a jug with a yellow warning label. I haven't a clue how he had gotten it back from the sheriff. He saw me and smiled. Not the old lopsided grin, but something colder. "Hey, Mark," he said. His voice was really low. "Remember how we used to play?" My mouth went dry. Tommy, what in the 9 rings of hells are you doing?" He shrugged, his eyes flickered to the house, the barn, and then back to me. "World's a different place now. People don't look at you unless you make them. And I always like being noticed." I took a shaky step back. "I've heard that you hurt people, Tommy. You gotta stop this nonsense." He looked at the Supersoaker turning in his hands. "It's just a tool, Mark. Just like anything." He squeezed the trigger, sending a thin stream of clear liquid into the grass. It sizzled, the smell sharp and chemical, burning my nose. "Oh, now that's not water, Tommy. Now what in the 9 hells is it? Tommy, you telling me that's acid?" I managed, my voice barely more than a whisper. He grinned wider. "It hadn't been water for a long time, Mark." I wanted to run, to scream, to do something, but all I could do was stand there and remember the way things used to be. The lazy days, the laughter, the way we thought summer would last forever. Tommy turned and walked into the field, never looking back. I watched him go until the corn swallowed him whole. I'd called the sheriff on my phone, but he never came back. I had heard later on that the sheriff's car tires had melted to the road. I never saw Tommy for a long time after that night. And the years rolled by, but Tommy's shadow hung over Birch Lane like a storm cloud that wouldn't move on. Folks tried to pretend life was normal again, mowing their lawns, repainting their barns, waving as they passed by on tractors or pickup trucks. But you could all see it in their eyes. Nobody ever really relaxed. Not after Tommy. The sheriff's deputies kept busy, chasing ghost stories and chemical scares. A hay bale blackened overnight in the Petersons' field. A row of corn withered to nothing. Leaves burnt and brittle. And sometimes, someone swore they saw a lone figure walking in the back roads at dusk. Something bright and plastic glinting at his side. But nobody ever got close. Nobody wanted to. I kept mostly to myself, working long hours, fixing things that didn't really need fixing. And every so often I'd get a letter from Jesse. He had a wife and a mortgage now, 2 states away. Frankie called once from a payphone in Montana, his voice thin with distance and static. We talked about the old days, but neither of us mentioned Tommy. It was like we'd made a silent pact. The past could stay buried as long as nothing dug it up. But Birch Lane remembered. That's the thing about the small towns. Memories get passed around like hand-me-downs, growing stranger and scarier every year. Kids dared each other to sneak out to the Miller barn, whispering about the acid man. Parents warned them to stay away from strangers, especially if they carried anything green. And one summer, a couple of city kids came through looking for trouble. They laughed at the stories, called us hicks and scaredy cats, until one of them came sprinting back from the creek, blisters rising on his arms and chest, screaming about a man in the trees with a melt gun. The sheriff searched the woods for days, but all they found were footprints and a half-empty jug with a skull and crossbones on the label. I stopped sleeping again after that. Every creak of the house, every gust rattling the windows made me sit bolt upright, heart pounding. Sometimes I dream of the old gang running wild under the July sun, but in the dream, Tommy's Supersoakers had always dripped something clear and smoking, and his eyes were always flat and hungry. The worst part was, some tiny, stubborn piece of me missed him. Missed the kid he'd been before the world got mean and he started fighting back. And sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at the corner of Main and Birch, half expecting to see him riding up on his battered bike, grinning and calling my name. but that Tommy was gone. There was only the legend now, the Acid Man, the ghost of Birch Lane, the kid who could never miss. Deadeye Tommy. It was late August, years later, when Tommy came back for the final time. That night the air was heavy and close, thunder rumbling somewhere far off. I was closing up the hardware store when the power flickered, and then it went out. The world outside the windows turned pitch black, the kind of darkness you only get in the country, where the stars blink like cold eyes high above. I drove home slow, headlights sweeping the empty road, mind racing with old ghosts. When I pulled into my driveway, I saw it, a single muddy footprint on the porch. My stomach twisted. I left the truck running, grabbed the bat from the passenger seat, and I stepped out. "Tommy?" I shouted into the night, voice shaking. "If you're out there, you better come on out, boy. No more games." Silence. And then from the cornfield, a low whistle. The same tune we used to make as kids, a signal that meant, "I see you." My hands went clammy, but I followed the sound, heart pounding, bat gripped tight. The corn closed around me, muffling the world. I saw a flicker of movement, a flash green plastic in the moonlight, and suddenly Tommy stood there, maybe 10 feet away, Supersoaker at his side, a jug in his other hand. He looked older, harder, but his eyes were the same wild. "I knew you'd come back, Mark," he said, his voice completely flat. "You're the only one left who remembers." I swallowed, trying to keep my voice steady. "Now it don't have to end like this, Tommy. We could get you help. You don't have to be the monster everybody thinks you are." He laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "I've always been the monster. You just didn't see it." He lifted the Supersoaker, aimed it at my chest, and for a second, I was 9 again, daring him to hit me. But the liquid glinted under the moon, thick and unnatural. I braced myself. "You want an ending? Fine. But you're not getting out of here, Tommy. Not this time." He grinned, wicked and sharp. "Let's play one last game." He fired. I dove, the acid hitting as it hit the corn behind me. I scrambled forward, swinging the bat, knocking the Supersoaker from his hand. He lunged at me, tackling me into the dirt. The jug rolled away, its contents leaking, burning a hole straight through a cornstalk. We wrestled like kids, fists and knees and old tangled memories. He was stronger than I remembered, desperate, almost like a feral animal. I landed a lucky hit and he staggered back, clutching his side. "It was supposed to be fun, Mark," he panted, voice breaking. "We were supposed to be friends forever." "Oh, we were, Tommy," I said, my chest heaving. "But you changed." He looked at me then, and I'm talking about really looked, and for a split second I saw the boy he'd been. The one who just wanted to win, to matter, to be seen. He lunged again, wild and reaching for the Supersoaker, but I was faster. I swung the bat as hard as I could, the crack echoing through the field as it connected with the plastic body of the Supersoaker. The thing split open with a sickening snap, and a jet of acid splashed straight into Tommy's face. He reeled back, clawing at his skin, and for a moment, I just stood there, frozen in horror. The acid ate away at him almost instantly, his features bubbling, flesh melting down to the bone. And through it all, Tommy started to laugh. A horrible, gurgling sound, warped and monstrous. Even as his face dissolved, that laugh echoed through the stalks, high and wild. Sirens wailed in the distance, drawing closer. Someone must have seen the lights or even heard the shouting. I don't know. But Tommy dropped to his knees, face a ruin, still laughing. Still clutching the ruined Supersoaker with what was left of his hands. Tell him I was the best, Mark. Tell them nobody could have beat me. He choked out, his voice barely human. I nodded, tears stinging from my eyes. You were the best, Tommy. But the game's over. He collapsed in the dirt, the hiss of acid fading as the jug ran dry. The deputies came crashing through the corn, flashlights slicing the dark. They took what was left of Tommy away that night, the melted Supersoaker sealed in a plastic bag. They said he'd never see daylight again. Maybe that's true. Maybe not. But on quiet nights, when the wind rattles the windows and the moon lights up the fields, I remember the boy with the devil's aim, and the summer when everything changed.